You know, this question about like focusing on your strengths and or weaknesses as a musician is very deep, and it's very philosophical, you know, to be honest with you. So I want to answer this one with care, and this specific one really resonates with me. There's a guy who's a Chinese billionaire, and I remember hearing a quote from him where he said that he never ever has worked on any of his weaknesses. He has really drilled down into his core competencies and strengths and continually tries to refine those. And he finds it, you know, pretty worthless to work on and elevate his weaknesses. Very interesting statement, you know, to be honest with you. And I would think, you know, kind of controversial to a lot of people. I think with this question, I'm just going to sort of answer it in a different way because I think it's really, truly relative and personal to each individual person, okay? And to a certain extent, I think you kind of have to do both, okay? And depending on where you are in your career, you might allocate more to your strengths and less to your weaknesses and so on and so forth. So let me just kind of illustrate a few just factual points. When you are in the beginning stages of your development, everything is a weakness, okay? So you really have to work on your weaknesses. Whereas if you are a professional, seasoned, experienced player, and you have a recording career and a touring career where you're out playing songs from your recent album, you might want to lend a little more towards your strengths and refine those. So again, it's personal to the individual, and it really needs to be customized, you know, to each person. And it's sort of where you focus depends on where you are, you know, in your career at the time. The one thing that I would say is that, and I think this is sort of the biggest point I want to drive home with this, is that we all need to determine what it is that we really want as players. Whether that's like the style of music that we want to focus on, or the type of player that we want to be. Are we a more emotional and laid back type of player, or are we really want to be a shredder and like high energy person? I think that's the bigger question here, okay? It's not so much whether to focus on your strengths or whether to focus on your weaknesses. It's more of a question of like, what do you want to be, okay? Again, whether that's stylistic or the type of player you are. And once you determine the answer to that question, then this idea of focusing on strengths or weaknesses can kind of be easier to manage, okay? So for instance, if you're like, well, I want to be a shredder rock metal player. Well, if your weakness is playing funk, rhythm, groove stuff, well, it's not really applicable, okay? Let's say you're a blues player and you're going for like a high degree of expressiveness as a musician, but you're lacking in your real shredder, you know, blazing guitar chops. Well, that's really kind of irrelevant to your style. So that may be a weakness, but at the same time, it's not applicable to where you want to go. So I think the best way that I can offer any advice regarding this strengths or weakness and where to allocate your focus. It's more of what you want to be. What do you want to be as a player, whether that's stylistically or just the type of player? And that will determine where you want to allocate certain aspects of your practicing.